Hello everybody, my name is David Keck, and this is Surviving Abuse Podcast.
I don't understand why it was me. I don't know if I'll ever be the same. Is the same what I want anyway? You took what I thought I could never get back. I quit holding on to the anger. I broke down just to begin again. Won't let you win any longer. I'm back. Taking the good, kissing the bad goodbye. Now I'm back, and I'll pray for you. I'm done hurting. And we begin again. Now I'm back, and I'll pray for you. I'm done hurting.
Hello everybody, thank you all for joining us. This is the first episode of season 2, so that means the holidays are now over. Thank God, I guess. So we're going to be, as we talked about, doing things a little differently, and for the December episodes, we released all the episodes on race. And of course, Keonia was involved in every one of them. She was very much requested. And so part of what we're going to be doing now with season 2 is having her on to discuss some documentaries with us. So, with that being said, hello, Keonia.
Hello, David.
You don't get enough of me Monday through Friday, so now here we are.
I know. Always together.
I love it. I love it. So, with that being said, why don't you tell us what we are talking about? And I'm going to go ahead and state that I'm mad.
Okay, you're mad. You have every reason to be mad when we talk about what we're getting ready to talk about.
Yeah.
All right. So what we are talking about today is there is a documentary on Netflix called Procession.
I don't think I've been inside this church in more than 30 years.
When we look at the windows, you can never think something bad might happen here.
We're trying to walk through each other's memories and the things that haunt us the most. Each survivor is writing their own script.
I'm a New York City contractor. I can chew the balls of a union electrician, but I can't talk about what happened to me when I'm 13.
I have so much anger and hatred, I can't even put it into words.
We have over 230 priests that we know of that have been sexually abusive in this area.
Catholic Church says, tell your mother we're sorry. You tell my mother you're sorry because she still believes in you.
In my mind, it's like they're not going to win. And that's how I cope with it.
Do I have concerns? Yes, I have concerns being re-traumatized.
If it's too painful, we shouldn't do it.
I need to conquer these fears.
Dude.
You did something that is so hard for me to do. This is a vehicle to help other guys.
I'm here for you.
You chose to live and to love, and in return, you chose to be loved.
This is not like a normal documentary. So a lot of documentaries will take you from start to finish on what happened to an individual, that sort of thing. That is not necessarily this. These are a group of men who were abused in the Catholic Church. And what we are actually following is basically their way of confronting that past. So there is something called drama therapy, which I would have never in a million years thought about. And that's basically what happens in this documentary, is these individuals, they're going to confront their past using drama to basically replay the events that happened to them.
I didn't know this existed either. And so when this trauma therapist was on the documentary and was talking about drama therapy, I was like, what the hell is that? Like, I've been in therapy for 7 years and I'm really interested about it.
Oh, yeah, because it just, it's so interesting when you watch them have that moment where they feel some relief. Is the trauma still there? Absolutely. It doesn't go away. But it's like they are taking the power back in these reenactments. And I find that incredibly powerful.
Yeah. I will say that I have probably watched this documentary fully 2 times. No exaggeration, it probably took me 6 tries to actually watch it. This one triggered me in a lot of ways, but what I did appreciate, and especially with that drama therapy, is it was really about these raw emotions, and we get to see a lot of that. I think the oldest one was 62, and he was in tears the whole time.
Okay, so let's get started. The opening scene. So, opening scene of this is, totally caught me off guard. It's literally a press conference that has happened. So, picture this. So, you have Rebecca Randalls, who is the attorney for these individuals. You have a gentleman by the name of Michael Sandridge, Tom Viviano, and Mike Foreman. They all have a piece to say. So Tom Viviano is the gentleman that you were talking about that was 62 years old. He basically, in this press conference, he says that I'm 62 years old and this is still affecting me. And he's
still
like,
to this day.
To this day. And he is like broken down
and
in tears.
Crying.
Crying. Then you have Mike Foreman, who is, I will say he's the person who probably impacted me the most, but probably not everyone will have that reaction to him. But he is just absolutely full of anger. Like, the vitriol that this man spews is on a whole nother level. Like, the amount of disdain that he has for the Catholic Church is absolutely unreal, and it is absolutely justified. Like, my man is like, he has nothing good to say whatsoever. And then you have Michael Sandridge, who is, to me, it seems like for him, the way that this has affected him is to make him a little bit withdrawn. Like, to me, he's kind of the silent pillar of strength in this whole documentary. Like, he's there for the other guys. Like, there's at one point something that he's asked to do that's hard for him, but he's willing to do it because part of his healing is to help them get through their healing.
Yeah. I really appreciated that they were all going through a different emotion, based on the same trauma. And we got to see all those different emotions. People sometimes forget that we do get angry, it's not that we're just sitting around feeling sorry for ourselves all the time. There are times that we're scared. There are times that we're mad. There are times that all we can do is cry. There are times that we get depressed. There's all these, and I felt like we got to experience all that with these men.
Oh, absolutely. All of them process things just a bit differently. So, and that's how this thing opens up. It opens up with those gentlemen and Rebecca Randalls, who is the actual attorney. Now, all of this took place in the Kansas City, St. Louis area. So there is a gentleman who later we'll meet in the documentary who's not necessarily from that area. He was originally from Cheyenne, Wyoming, but they brought him in as well. So that's your basic setup. Then we move to the next scene. And this is what tripped me out about this documentary at first. I was like, what the hell am I actually watching, right? So We've just went from this press conference that was really like, this happened. Like, this was a real press conference. To this next scene of some man, and I didn't catch it at first, but it's actually the Tom Viviano character, right?
Mm-hmm.
I shouldn't call him a character. He's a man. He's somebody who has been sexually assaulted as a child, sexually abused as a child. But it's his voice, but I didn't catch it at first. And what you hear in the scene is some man saying, "What do you ask of the church?" Parents say baptism. And then he goes on to ask these godparents, will you help raise this child in the faith of the church? So basically what you're watching is a baptism. And I'm like, how did we go from here to here? So basically what they've done is they went from this real thing and just put you right into one of the scenes that they were shooting. But you don't know that at first, which is kind of, because I was like, wait a minute, like, did I flash to something else? Like, what is happening?
Well, it took me a minute to realize how they're filming this documentary, and I've never seen one filmed this way before, because you had the press conference, and then you had this that I don't want to give too much away on, because I know you're about to get there, but at one point I was like, did I pick a movie and not a documentary?
Yes, that's exactly what I was thinking, and so, by the way, my husband was watching this with me, and he was like, this is supposed to be a documentary. I'm not trying to be entertained. I want to know the truth. Like, we were like, what is happening here? And then it goes from that scene, and then you hear Mike, the one that I was telling you that was, a bit on the angry side. He's like, let's get the fuck out of here. Like, he's just like he is.
And it floored me when I heard that. I was like, whoa, I'm not expecting this. I was not, I thought it was brilliantly done. Once I figured out what they were doing, I was like, holy shit, I love this.
And this is the thing that kind of stuck with me from the beginning to the end. And it's this paragraph that Tom basically says. It says, I claim you for Christ. I baptize you in the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. May God, the giver of all life, human and divine, bless the parents of this child. Now, that's typical stuff that is said out of baptism. But you hear that and you think about what these men have went through, right? So you are claiming these kids for Christ, for the church. And this is what happens in the church.
Yeah.
Like that just like every time like I would move on to another scene, like I would keep on seeing flashbacks of that and that being read out loud. To like, man, like this is supposed to be something that's holy. And how fucked up is it that these disgusting things are happening in a church?
Well, and I might be backtracking a little bit, but one thing that really got my attention, and I questioned it, and then throughout the show, I kind of forgot about it, but then at the end, when everything was kind of coming together, I thought about it again, and it made sense. But, you know, in this in this opening scene, you know, it has them walking down the aisle to the pew where this baptism is taking place. And nothing scares me more than those oohs and ahs and that vocal tone. I guess they were wanting to make it a little bit sinister because of the topic. The only thing that kept me together with this is that it wasn't children singing it, because if it was kids, I'd have been done. I wouldn't have been able to do it. Like, it was just so terrifying to me. But then, like, this little boy is up at the pew, and he drops an urn of ashes.
Oh my God, yes!
And he takes off running, you know, and he kind of runs upstairs, and all of a sudden at one time, everyone turns around and just stares at him.
Oh my God.
That's when I started thinking, is this a movie? And then I caught on to it not being, because the next scene, you know, kind of helped me realize what it is. So can we take a minute and explain like how this documentary was filmed, so they'll know when we're going through like the movie part, quote unquote, versus the documentary part?
Right. So basically what happened was, apparently once the press conference happened, Rebecca Randalls was contacted and they wanted to do something, right? They didn't know what something was. They just knew that they wanted to do something. They knew they wanted to do some type of documentary. They just didn't know exactly what type of documentary it would be. Would it be one that followed someone's story from beginning to end, or what exactly would happen? Well, Rebecca, like, she is so protective and so kind to these individuals. My girl is out here doing the work. Do you hear me? She is out here with a whole garage full of boxes, and she's telling folks these aren't boxes, these are people's lives. Like, she is doing the work.
I'm a firm believer in letting the women do the work, because they're going to get the shit done quick and right the first time.
Has tried every child sex abuse case in the Kansas City area except for one. So this is kind of her bread and butter. This is what is on her heart to do. Like, she's like, no, like, you're not getting ready to be out here abusing kids. Like, I'm on it. Like, she's like, come at me, bro. Like, we're just not going to do it. And so I'm sure they were comfortable with her because she was a woman. Like, I mean, when you see them in this documentary, like, they all love on her.
Yeah.
Like, she is definitely kind to them and does whatever she can in whatever way she can for them.
But another thing that I thought was really interesting is throughout the show, you see these relationships build. And every single one of these guys are saying, you know, when they're retelling their story, they're back to being that little boy. And when they say that, and then you see the relationship between her and these guys, you can tell that it's very motherly. Mm-hmm. She did have that mother instinct. She was able to help manage and control that inner child, that beaten inner child inside them with a little bit of love. And I thought that was really cool. Now, that could be me overanalyzing shit, because, you know, I beat it with a stick. But that's what I took from it.
Yes, you do. But no, I do think you're right. So to get back to where we were, so when they knew they were going to do this documentary, they didn't know exactly what they were going to do. And so when they came to Rebecca said, you know what? She asked the important question: should we do this? And if we do this, how do we do it safely? Right? Like, the first question is, should we even do it? And so she thought, you know, and I think in her mind, she thought, I don't want to do anything that's unsafe, but at the same time, it could help those little boys who can't stand up for themselves, right? Like, it could put a spotlight on the issues in the Catholic Church. So what she thought was that, well, let's take a look at those individuals who had already been in the spotlight a little bit, who have already been in press conferences and in the media, who have already shared their story publicly. She didn't want to go, and I think this was just so kind of her. Like, I don't want to oust someone who is not willing to share their story. I don't want to basically, spin the wheel on someone who agrees to do it, but then we find out later, like this is just way too traumatic because they've never done anything or been in the spotlight or, talked about it publicly.
I really respected that too, because one thing that is very common with victims through all forms of trauma is we feel like we've lost that sense of control. And so you have these producers and these people that are, of course, going to be thinking, I'm going to make good TV. This is money. It's going to be out-of-pocket money unless I make it good and make a profit. But I don't think that even with that being in their mind, which I don't hate them for, there was still that respect of, if we find someone that just cannot handle this, we get them the right treatment that we need, and we let them go take care of. And even some of the people that we will meet throughout the show that the producers were bringing on to make sure that these victims who are now reliving their tragedies are getting the therapy and the care and taking time for the self-care that they need. I thought it was brilliantly done. I have such a respect for Robert Greene.
Yeah, absolutely. So then we go from her, and then we cut to the next scene. And what you see are basically them bringing in those individuals that we're going to meet, and then they're kind of saying a bit or two. So you have Ed, Tom, Dan, Ed, Michael, Mike, and Joe. Mike, Michael, and Tom we met at the very beginning of this whole ordeal. So you have Ed, and Ed is a gentleman who I think a lot of victims of childhood tragedies will probably relate to him. So what he basically opens up and says to everyone, he was like, look, I can't risk not being believed. That's the first thing, right? Because so often in cases, especially with men and childhood abuse, they're not believed. The second thing he basically kind of hinted on, he was like, I can't have people thinking that I'm trying to exploit my situation for money. Like, that's not what this is about. Like, this is, this has been pitched to me. I feel like some good can come from this. And then the other one is, he was like, I can't have people thinking that I'm this weak, frail man. He was like, because that's not what I am. He was like, I'm a contractor in New York. Like, I can go toe-to-toe with anybody. He said, but this particular situation, he was like, it's going to bring up a whole lot of stuff. And of course, I'm paraphrasing here. And he was like, I don't want to be seen as the man in the corner, broke down crying. Like, because that's not who I am on a daily basis.
And I get that, but that also broke my heart, because it shows how we all get molded and trained into thinking that if you see a tear, it's a sign of weakness. Like that. Like, these men have made something of themselves. They have fought for years for their sanity. Mm-hmm. That is strength. And if they want to fucking cry, I'll cry with you. And
they should be able to. Like, there shouldn't be that stigma. But in his mind, he's like, I don't want to be seen as anything that I'm not. He's like, I am a man, and by golly, don't shoot, this documentary if you're just going to portray me as something that I'm not.
Right.
And that was what his point was. Yes, he should be able to cry. He should be able to have those emotions and not be judged. But unfortunately, that's the world that we live in. And so in his mind he was like, I know, he didn't say it, but I'm sure in his mind he was thinking, so many times with these Hollywood films, they over-glorify certain aspects of people's lives. Like, and they make it almost into a stereotype. So in his mind, he was like, okay, I'm doing this. I'm trusting you guys. But look, don't be over here trying to make me seem like I'm this sobbing, weak man who can't get through the day. Like, I work, I'm successful, I'm married. Like, that's not how I want you to portray me.
Yeah. I thought it was beautifully said and handled. And I think that, and again, even like, I'm such a fan of Robert Greene now. Like, I think that he gave the victims such respect, and I just, again, I like how this was done.
Absolutely. So then we move on, and then we meet Dan Lorene. So Dan was the interesting one to me. So Dan, he actually worked in commercial films, like local commercial films. So what you see him a lot of times throughout this thing is he's actually scouting locations for this documentary. Like, that's what he's doing. And at one point, he even says that he was really gung-ho about it, and then he started coming to all these churches, and then he's like, ooh, like, it's like trudging up some stuff for him, and he's probably the easiest going one of the bunch. So his story was that both he and his brother were abused. And he basically says he wants something, part of what he wants to come from this is something, that connection with his brother. Like, he feels like something is broken in that relationship because he feels like his brother is blaming himself, but he doesn't want his brother to blame himself because it wasn't his fault.
Right.
And so he is an interesting person. Like, I just feel like he's the person who you don't know that something's going on with.
Right.
Like, you see him and you think that he's just going on about everyday life, and you would never guess in a million years that this thing had happened to him.
It seemed like he was able to find that light switch, that on-off button, that he's able to turn off this part of him to go out into the day to do what he's got to do. And then sometimes that's healthy. Sometimes it's nice to leave things at the door, you know, as long as you are allowing yourself to visit those places. But I will say several times throughout, and he was one of the ones, like when he walked into the church and all those feelings were coming back, that was the second time that I felt this. The first time we had touched on it in the beginning when one of the ladies, I'm horrible with names, you all know that by now, but when one of the ladies was talking about, she didn't want to do anything that was going to put anyone in harm and to keep everyone safe. When she said the word safe, chills ran through me. And then him going into this church and the emotions that he had was another set of chills. And what I realized is that I forget where, A, I'm not Catholic, B, I have a great relationship with God, but I'm not involved in a church.
Mm-hmm.
So I forget about the religious politics of things. And what they kept reminding me accidentally was the power that especially the Catholic Church has.
Oh my God, yes. Like I think there's, and we'll talk about it a little bit later, there's even a scene where there's all this ritualism, and that's part of what one of the individuals wants to embed into his scene is just the power of the symbols and things of that nature. I mean, that's part of it, even the opening scene with the incense burner, right? Like, you see that, and it just, I mean, look, I'm not even Catholic, and it just, there's this image of holy, mm-hmm. right? Because of all the symbolism of everything that is done in the Catholic Church. And so, and again, it goes back to what we were saying earlier, the thought that this is supposed to be something that's so holy, but some individuals, I don't want to say the entire Catholic Church, I don't want to say that, but there's certain individuals within that organization that are using those symbols, for power over someone else, to abuse someone else.
Well, that's one of the things I have highlighted here in my notes, because I don't follow a lot of organized religion. I am terrified of organized religion. And so I sometimes forget, and I wanted to, especially with this documentary, educate myself on what they were meaning by things, because when I hear the word ritual, and it's probably because of the movies I watch.
Come on, what a cult.
Right. It's because of the documentaries I watch. I think of these horrible, mean cults out like burning
right out here in Utah. You've got this one man who's got 1 million girls out here.
Uh-huh.
And so. But this is what I would implore you. I kind of think of it that way too. When you think of ritual, you think of all these spooky things. But a ritual can really be anything, right? Mm. So, for example, my daily ritual is I get up early in the morning, I take a shower, I go to the gym, and my ritual before I ever even get started doing anything is to touch my toes, stretch my back. That's a ritual. That's a daily. So a ritual can have, it doesn't necessarily have to be what we think about, what
Right.
we're thinking about
Right.
with these people out here, these cults and things of that nature.
Right. Well, I had Googled a couple of things because I didn't want to take a chance on offending anybody. And of course, I want to be educated about the topics that I'm talking about. I'm going to misspeak a lot. I'm going to say things where people are going to email me and be like, David, what the hell are you talking about? Sit down, But when I heard that word, I was like, so, like I Googled, and it was talking about the purpose of a religious community. And to simplify it, it says, no matter the actual tenets of belief, a religious community is broken people gathered together and intact in some ritual. And it said that they become a tiny bit more whole and regain a little bit more power over their trauma that they have been stripped away from. However, a lot of these religious communities withhold the healing instead of offering
that's
the healing.
powerful. Wow.
And then the last line of it says, people are hurt in unimaginable ways with these religious communities. And I've said on the podcast before, and I know I say things in a humorous sense sometimes, but sometimes there's truth behind the joke. And I mean this, I can't even apologize for it, but when someone tells me that they are a Christian, that is what I fear the most. Because I associate it with that organized, I don't really know what the Bible means. I'm just going to pretend I do. I'm not really going to do my homework with it. So I'm going to judge everybody because I'm riding the coattails of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost.
And here, and since we're on that topic, and I think I have said this to you before, because you would have known me a few years ago, I went to church religiously. Like, every Sunday, you couldn't, I was going to be in church. I was lucky that I was in an organization that I did not feel like I was being manipulated or abused. As a matter of fact, the pastor used to say, I could be telling y'all anything. Read your Bible. Like, he would harp on it all the time. He was like, I could be up here in this pulpit just talking any old thing to you. I could be up here to swindle you. You're not going to know if you don't read your Bible. Like, you need to read or maybe, he was like, and I'm not perfect. Maybe I misinterpret something. Maybe that's a conversation that we need to have. And I think that's a healthy relationship to have with a pastor. Someone who says that, no, let's talk about this. Right. Not everything I say is, yes, hopefully I'm anointed by Lord Christ Jesus, God, whatever. Hopefully that's the case. He said, but I'm imperfect. Maybe I heard it wrong. Maybe what I thought I was seeing, maybe that wasn't the case. I need to be corrected sometimes too. And so I was really lucky to have a pastor who was like that. But I have heard horror stories. I have seen, I won't say that I've ever been a member of a congregation in which was obviously a phony, congregation that shouldn't have been in an organization, period. But I have attended a service of one that when I left, that I was just like, something is not right there.
Yeah. And I want to be clear that if I had to put a title to my religious beliefs, it would be a Christian. I'm not knocking it by any means. The fear when I hear that word is what people are believing that the Bible says when sometimes it just doesn't. People say that the Bible contradicts itself, and I don't think that's the case. I think the Bible, and it was brilliantly said to me in one of the episodes in season 1 when I had a Southern Baptist preacher on there. He was like, the Bible doesn't contradict itself. It's having a conversation with itself. And one little story that I want to share, and then we can get back to it, but one of the last times I was in church was I went to visit a church with my cousins. And they had talked about how great their church is, and, everyone's just loving, and, just go in and be yourself and you'll be fine. It's church, you're welcome, right? Mm-hmm. So I walk in, and it's a Southern Baptist church, and of course, they all want to stand at the door and shake your hand as you walk in and speak to you, and I'm naturally a flamboyant guy. I dress loud, you can sometimes tell in just conversation with me, that I'm openly gay. And I noticed this one man was looking at me really hard, and he was an older guy. So the preacher gets up, does the morning prayer, and asks if anyone has a song they want to share. And he was like, oh, I do. And he goes up and he says, I'm wanting to pray for the homosexuals out there that think that their lifestyle is an alternate lifestyle. That's the worst thing you can ever call it. It's not an alternate. And sings Amazing Grace, which that song has nothing to do about being gay and a damnation. So I was like, how did that song come out?
I know, it's about having grace for the love. Oh, baby, I can't.
So everyone was sitting down. He was singing a cappella, but I stood up. I looked him dead in the eye. Of course, there was a lot of separation because he was up there. And I made sure that he seen me, and I walked out the door. And that, other than a funeral and a wedding, is the last time I've been to church. Like, that is not, I don't think that's what God wants.
No. I mean, well, and I think that we will get a little, like, once we talk about my boy Mike, he kind of feels the same way. He's like, what does God think about some of these things? You know what I mean?
And that's one of the questions that I have, or one of the notes I have, is several times throughout the documentary, he was like, what would Jesus and God think about this? Like, what would their real thoughts be about this? And hearing him say it, so, because we've all heard someone ask that question. There was something about the way that he said it, and it just makes me gag. And not in the good gag. It breaks me.
Right. Like, he like I said, he was, of all the gentlemen, he's the one who impacted me the most. He may not be the one for everyone just because of, he's such a hard, the place in which he is just so full of anger. So some other people may have a different reaction to him, and I can understand that. I totally can. But for him, he was the one that broke me. Like, he was the one who, out of all the, and I think it may be because most of the time when you see these documentaries, it kind of is like what Ed was saying earlier when he was saying, I can't be seen as this person who's balled up in a corner crying, that kind of thing. So many times with these documentaries, that's, or reenactments, I should say, they portray somebody that way. Mm-hmm. And so that's what we're used to seeing, right? Yeah, we may see some anger, but not to the extent of this. Like, this man's blood is boiling all day long.
He wakes up out of 10.
Right, every morning.
Yeah. Like, and it scares me. Like, he's going to have a heart attack,
Like, he's the one who, man, he gets me every time. So
I think that you're really good at analyzing people, and when you and I, and reading people, and when you and I were talking before we started, and you were mentioning Ed and how you were drawn to him, and you made a comment that really stuck out to me, and I think that you were able to see that his anger isn't for anyone to take personally, but so many people in his life probably is.
Right.
When his anger is trying to be placed somewhere that he doesn't have access to place it.
Right. Yeah. Mike, you mean, yes.
Oh, yeah, yes, I'm sorry. I think I said Ed, but Mike, yes.
Yes, absolutely. So you have Mike, and he gives his speech, and again, like, it's to the point where one of the gentlemen at one point makes the comment, like, you should do voiceovers. Like, it's just that sinister.
Yeah.
His voice, like, he has a great, like somebody really should hire him to do voiceovers for, like, Halloween movies, like, legit. Like,
yeah.
And then you move on, and then they introduce Monica Finney, who is the dramatic therapist. Like, she's the person who's kind of overseeing all of this, which, again, thought was brilliant that they actually took the time to basically bring somebody in. Now, she mentions what she thinks trauma is, or how she pictures trauma. She basically states that trauma is something that's sticky. And so that stickiness, this thing that happens to you, it's got you stuck. Like, it's sticky, like it won't let you pull from it. And so what the drama therapy does is it allows the person who's experienced this to just put out whatever it is on the inside into the world in whatever way makes sense. So that's what the drama therapy is. It could be something that makes absolutely no sense whatsoever, but if that's what feels right to you, then that's what you do, right? And I just thought that is just, in so many ways, is just brilliant. While what these individuals do, it will make clear sense. Like, there's logic to it. Like, they are basically reliving and facing those fears. Just the thought that it doesn't have to be that organized. Like, it's, if you want to, lay and yell and kick and scream in the middle of the floor, if that's what makes sense to you to put it out in the world, that's okay. Like, the fact that there doesn't have to be any boundaries. There's no one telling you or controlling how you decide to put it out into the world, as long as you don't, bring physical harm to somebody else.
Right.
Let me just throw that little
Let's not traumatize someone else during this recovery
yes.
attempt, okay?
That's
Unless that's her plan for job stability and to make money.
I mean, right?
I mean, times are hard.
Well, I mean, we're still trying to recover from COVID over here.
Right.
Gotta hook the sister up.
Do you think that I keep waiting, and I don't know if I can wait any longer because I need to laugh for a minute. Do you think that it's time for us to bring up Sasha Sanders?
Let's bring up Sasha.
Girl,
Sanders.
as soon as the camera came into the room and she was sitting there with all of her tattoos and that Janis Joplin hair and that lipstick.
My girl in the red lipstick.
Not a bit of it on her tooth. Like, it doesn't come off of her straw.
I'm still trying to figure out how the hell she made that happen. I can put on some, like I can do all the primer and all the stuff in the world so that it won't come off. It'll be all over my teeth right now.
I love this girl. And so, like, she reminded me of, like, a Janis Joplin. As soon as I seen her, I was like, if I walked into a dinner party, I would want to sit right beside her. I know she's drinking Scotch neat and has a shit ton of stories and is the life of the party.
I'm sure she is. A lot. But I will say, you know, as much as Rebecca loves on these guys, like Sasha, like, nah, that is they girl. Like,
yeah, you can tell she's ride or die.
Yeah.
I mean, she's
like she is they girl. And when I tell you, like, just the love when every time that they're around her, they're like hugging on her, kissing on her, like this is like, I don't know what it is, but whatever it is, like they feel like that is their support. Like she is their support.
And for her to you know how you can see someone and just be drawn to them?
Mm-hmm.
I don't really get that on TV a lot. You know, there's a lot of stuff in the way, but the minute I saw her, I was drawn to her. I was like, I want to know more about this lady.
I know, and then we don't get that much.
We don't get much, and so I've created this whole story in my head of her and her life, and I love her. Like she wakes up in the middle of the night and reapplies that damn lipstick. Like,
I think you mentioned it might be tattooed.
I was going to say with her body ink, which was beautifully done. I was like, maybe they're tattooed on, but no one has ever seen her without that red lipstick.
Yeah, you right, you damn right, they have it.
And I ain't mad at her for it.
Right? Like, my girl out here. But I think it was mentioned that she had also been in litigation with all of these individuals at some point. So she is just, I don't know, that girl,
there has to be a documentary about her made. Like, I'm sure there's not one yet, but there needs to be because there's just she's got stories.
She's got tons of stories, and we need to know them all.
If we could work on getting her a guest and be like, look, we don't really know much about you. We're just going to stand here and listen to you talk.
That's right. Just tell us all the things.
And what lipstick do you wear?
That's right. And how the hell are you keeping it on?
There was one time that I lost my shit. I had to pause it and laugh because, and I'm sure we'll touch more in detail on the actual experience or situation around this experience, but Michael and...
It was Dan. Which scene are you talking about?
The confession.
It's Dan and Michael, yes.
Dan and Michael, okay.
Yes.
So Michael goes into the confession room. He wanted to go in there and just, because they're back into the church. And so Dan kind of looks at the camera and he said, there's no way I can't do this. And he just puts his hand up against the door and puts all of his weight in it. And then you hear Michael behind the door saying, and do not do that. and it was so like...
There was a couple that got me with him, baby, let me tell you. There was the scene with him and this dog. First of all, I don't know what kind of dog this is. Oh my God. And so he makes the comment that sometimes people state that they sometimes start to look like they're animals. I'm like, baby, yes you do. You look exactly like that.
I know. It's like the camera kind of zoomed and I was like, oh shit.
Yeah, and then he's like, but that's okay, because he's like, if I look like that dog, like, I want to look like that dog.
Cody and I made sure that we adopted gorgeous dogs.
He had that, and then there was the other scene too. There was another scene with him too that just made me, oh man, he was talking, they were just walked into a church and they were looking at these pillars. He was like, they were beautiful, but I wouldn't do it. They are beautiful, but I wouldn't have done it.
That's how I would have done it.
Like, I'm an interior decorator. No, I wouldn't have done it. That's not how I would have done that.
I know we got to go totally off top, but I just love Sasha, and I really like Michael, so I'm glad we're going to talk about them for a minute.
All right, so we now cut to a scene where we have got Mr. Michael, who we were just talking about, trying on robes in the church. And he goes through, so basically he starts talking about how everything is symbolism, you know, like there's so much symbolism within the church. But at the same time, you can kind of see that he's just very, like, kind of cringed by trying on this stuff. Because, you know, they're going to come up and, you know, write their own scripts and things of that nature. And so it's wardrobe, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's why he's trying this stuff on. And you can just tell that he's just beside himself about having to even put this stuff on. Then we flash to Ed, who basically talks about how his former self is just some kid that he used to know, but he has no connection to. Like, I thought that was incredibly sad. Like, he's just, like, there's this kid, like, this thing happened to him, but because he, in order to cope, he basically has cut himself off from his former self, like that kid, because I'm sure, and this is me, I mean, I don't mean to speak for him, but if it were me, I can see myself not wanting to know that child, right? That child was powerless to do anything. And so, you know, I don't know, that's something that hit me.
Yeah, and he made the comment, too, that was really a punch in the gut. He said, all these people around me get to talk about their childhood and what it was like when they were 13, and I can't. It's just so sad, the things that they were robbed of. And still to this day, being robbed of.
Absolutely. Like, it's so incredibly sad, and to think that this has happened to you know.
When we get to the part of the numbers, holy shit.
Oh my God, like, it's just insane to me. So, after we have Ed say his bit about how this kid is someone he used to know, we then kind of flash to Dan, and Dan is now scouting for location. He talks about the fact that, you know, each of them are going to script scenes based on their experiences. And this is where we kind of get into what I was telling about Dan, who was super excited at first, but then as he's scouting these locations, he's becoming more and more uneasy about the situation. So, and basically, I think we get some written verbiage at some point that basically talks about Dan's abuser. I think his name was Hugh Monahan, fled Missouri, and has been avoiding arrest for years. So this man is still out there, like, knowing, like, they can't get a hand on him whatsoever. So basically, he has received absolutely no justice. He's not the only one, but this man is literally out there doing God knows what to whom.
And if I'm getting ahead, let me know. But is this when they start talking about the statutes of limitation?
So that's the very next scene. So
okay.
This is when we get into Mike, my boy Mike, Mr. I'm mad at everybody. So my man, and this cracked me up so bad. Like, I do not mean, like, these guys understand I am not laughing at this man's pain, because what he went through, he is absolutely justified to be angry. But Mike is out here by himself in front of the Catholic Church protesting. He's got 2 black signs up. One that goes into this whole... So basically, I'm going to get ready to read y'all what it says. It says, it is an absolute poverty. The statute of limitations is the crown jewel of the Catholic Church. What does God think about that? Right? So that is his first sign.
There's that question again.
That is his first sign. His second sign says www.iamnotcatholic.com. In parentheses, it says, read my story. This is a real thing, too, by the way. I actually went and Googled it. Like, I had no choice. Like, I was like, look, I had push pause. I was like, wait a minute, is that a website? That is an actual website. Like, I had no choice. Like, I felt like if he went through the trouble to be out there protesting by his damn self, I need to go out and look at this man's story, look at this damn address. So now he's out here protesting by himself, and some lady comes and peeks her head out the door and says, can I help you? He's like, no. Like, look, I know what I'm doing. Like, they end up... There was one guy who decides to come and stop to listen to his story. He thanks the man, and then they call the cops on him. So then we flash to Mike, and he's like, well, where the hell was these damn cops when I was 11 years old? Yeah. Like, you know.
And you know what's really sad, too, is that poor lady that popped her head out and said, can I help you? You already know, one of the priests called her and said, can you go take care of the situation? So,
right.
Why did she get nominated, Mama?
Right. Like, out here, like, my man is out here in the streets. He's like, y'all are going to know, damn it. Y'all are going to know.
And you know what? Good for him.
I know. Like, he's like, he has no problem. He's like, no. He's like, I'm going to get justice somehow. Now, but I will tell you, his is also, so we have Dan, who's, abuser is still out here in this world doing God's know what. But Mike's abuser actually died. So there is no justice for him. And then and let's back up a little bit. The reason that he has such an issue with the statutes of limitations is that by the time he recovered his memories of what happened to him and tried to take him to have his day in court, it basically was thrown out due to the statutes of limitations.
So tell us about the statutes of limitations with this case. Because they had talked about it a lot throughout, and there was stuff that I didn't even know. And honestly, at first I was like, are they talking about because it's a church? Do they have their own statutes of limitations? Because the way some things were worded, and
Right, so there's a couple different things. So in certain states, so it's different from what I understand. Now, I could be wrong, but from what I understand, it's different from state to state. There are certain crimes that cannot be prosecuted after a certain amount of time.
That's bullshit.
It is bullshit. And so especially when you think about abuse, oh, okay, so you're just going to go rape a child and, oh, well, it's been 15 years now, and I haven't been caught, so I'm good to go. What the hell is that?
And it seems like so many things play in the favor to the bad guy.
Right, absolutely.
Because my attacker, his fingerprints are all over my body till the day I die. So there is no real justice with it, and I'm stuck with this forever. And he can be like, well, it's been 15 years, I'm done. David who?
Right, this is just the most bizarre thing ever that I've ever heard. Fine, if you want to have a statute of limitation for petty theft, okay, fine, whatever.
Don't come after me for a stick and got my soul 10 years ago. Fine.
Okay.
But you're taking my innocence, you're taking my security, you're taking my faith.
Right, and every day, and so this man, every day, he is suffering because there is no justice for him. He needs to receive justice from, his attacker. He didn't find any justice from the court system, and he damn sure didn't find it from the Catholic Church, because let me tell you, he's going to remind you a million times that he is so, and let's back up a little bit. So he was abused when he was in 5th or 6th grade, but he is more upset with the Catholic Church than he actually is with his abuser. The reason why is because when he brings it up to them, and he actually replays the scene, part of his drama therapy was to reenact the scene when he went before this independent committee for the Catholic Church. They wrote him a letter that basically told him that they cannot substantiate his credibility. And let me tell you, when I tell you it set him off, it set him off. He's like, how in the hell can you tell me that you can't substantiate my credibility? I know what happened to me. And when I tell you, he is so incredibly upset. He's more upset with the Catholic Church just simply because he feels like they lied. He was like, there's no doubt in my mind that when I left that review, that they knew that my story was true, but they covered it up anyway. So Dan's story and Mike's story are similar. So there's bits and pieces that cross over, right, from Dan and Mike. And then there's a little bit that crosses over between Dan and Joe. Because Dan and Joe, they both were taken to places where there were lakes. And then with Dan and Mike, they both had to go before this independent committee and tell their stories. And to me, the whole situation to me is very intimidating. You think about you've been abused. And while my boy Mike was like, hell yeah, I want to go in front of these folks and I'm going to tell my story, he had gotten to a point where he was so angry, he had to let it out. But not everybody gets to that point, right? And so here you are, this person who's been abused, telling this story, and maybe you haven't told it to many people, and you're in a room full of, 4 to 8 individuals. Mm-hmm. Hell, I've not been abused, and that to me is intimidating.
Yeah, there's a couple of things I can relate to with that, and, it's... at one point, I remember that I was more mad at the judicial system and my community as a whole more than I was my attacker. I understand exactly because I had been hurt. I've been almost killed. And I'm supposed to be able to go to you all and trust you all and say, this person damaged me. And you're supposed to help fix it. And you didn't give a damn. And it is such a horrible, different kind of trauma when you end up finding out that Superman isn't really that great.
Right.
You
Like,
know?
it's just, yeah, it's incredible to me. Like, this, like, the amount of, how frustrating can it be? Does it have to be to know that you will never find justice? And our systems, in some ways, are, and I think you hit it earlier, is it helps the actual abuser, the guilty party. Like, that to me is just...
Well, and one thing that we had talked about before, because, going back to, we had just mentioned he walked into a room with 7 or 8 people, and then they're like, okay, here's your platform, tell your story, and you have to share everything right then, right there, regardless of your emotion or feelings behind it. And I kind of think of that with the victim's impact statement. I wrote the letter. I wanted to get up and read it. It was my truth. It was a way for me to get back that control. But then when it was time to do it, I, for lack of better words, I chickened out. Because you have these people that you don't fucking know standing in front of you wanting to hear your fears.
Mm-hmm.
I have this person that gave me these new fears and scars, breathing the same air as me with his eyes and his family and friends' eyes on me, for me to expose of how vulnerable I've been and how hurt I am. And which was also, to me, showing them a sign of weakness, which is what he wanted, which would mean he won. And I chickened out. And I said, I had an 8-page letter in my hand, and I said, you know what? I can't read this. I'm not going to read this. I want to focus on the good, and I want this over. And I turned around and I sat down. And then now I'm in a healthier place. I would love to be able to call him up or sit in front of him in jail and read that fucking letter to him. But I can't now. I hate that. At one point, one of the guys was asked the question, would you want to see these people again? He said, yeah, I want them here right now.
That's our boy Mike, I'm telling you.
Yeah.
Mike is
He was
not
like, I want them here right
games.
now. And I got such a rush when I heard that, because if I got a phone call right now in the middle of recording with you on a Saturday night, and they said, hey, we're going to put your attacker on the phone, read that letter, bitch, give me that letter and give me 15 minutes.
Right.
Because I can do it now, but I couldn't then. And for them to put a time frame on it is disgusting to me.
It is disgusting.
And it's like when I called Nashville about the victims' compensation, because I started getting all these due bill notices that was supposed to fall into the victims' compensation. And I called Nashville, and I was like, why am I getting this? It's for the victims' impact. You all are supposed to be taking care of this. And they said, no, this was 2 years ago. You should be better by now. That's not how mental health works.
At all.
That's not how... You cannot put a time frame and say, okay, boo-boos are gone. The state kissed them away. That's not the way it fucking works.
No, not at all. Not with something like this. This is something that will be with you forever.
And so the point of me mentioning that is exactly what they're saying with all this, too, is how I took it. They're saying, okay, you've got the floor, tick-tock.
Let's go.
And then you're fixed, you're better, this is your Band-Aid.
Right, that's it, because we can't substantiate, as they told him, your claims. And so, like, and when I tell you, so the individual who he puts a name to, so his name is Archbishop Joseph Naumann. When I tell you, like, y'all, like, if y'all go out to the www.iamnotcatholic.com, like, I'm telling you, we're talking about a whole web pages, not even a web page. Like, I'm sure if you printed it out, it'd be like 40 pages long, of him just going in on the Catholic Church. And do you hear me? And he tells his story. Then he talks about Archbishop. At some point, I think he calls him a filth rat. Like, I was like, oh my God. Like, my boy is like, he is not playing no games when it comes to this.
But I'm not mad at him.
And I mean, because again, at the end of the day, it is absolutely justified, especially when you start listening to his story. And we'll get into his story in a little bit. But but the letter that he gets from Archbishop Joseph Naumann, or as he calls him, can you imagine? So you have been abused. You have been forced to tell your story in front of all these people. You're thinking that maybe something will come out of this. But then you get a letter that basically states that we can't substantiate your credibility. And then it ends in this right here. It says, "It is my sincerest prayer and hope through God's abundant and unfailing grace, you are able to experience healing and peace in your life." My blood would boil too. If someone basically just told me that they could not substantiate my credibility, basically calling me a liar, and then ended the letter with that.
And the control that this man has, because
Absolutely.
There are several people you could say that kind of shit to, and that church would have been blown up.
Right.
You know?
Like, just absolutely appalling. So Mike's situation, bless his little heart, and so in his case was dismissed, like just completely dismissed due to the statute of limitations, and so he is still like he's out here still hustling, trying to figure out how he gets justice. Like, I kid you not, like he won't stop. He's not going to stop, and I can't blame him because he feels like, I mean, and even at one point he states that there is no doubt in his mind that he would be a different human being if that didn't happen, if he wasn't abused.
And I think that for everybody that's been through this type of trauma, it makes you somebody else.
It makes you somebody else.
It's not fair.
No, not at all. So, then we flash forward, and then we come to the cut of the garage that we were talking about earlier. When you see, when y'all see this garage, this is boxes upon boxes upon boxes upon boxes. And you're looking at this garage and you're like, how in the hell is anybody keeping anything straight in this garage? This is my girl, Rebecca. She's in it. She is doing the work. She's like, look, these aren't just boxes. These are people's lives. Do you hear me? That's how she feels about this. She was like, I'm looking at that and I'm like, those look like boxes to me. But she is so in it. She is so, like, her work, like, this is her heart's work. You can tell this is what she feels like she was meant to do. Like, she doesn't see that monstrosity of her garage.
Because and she's also one of those people boxes. Where it's like, I need Bob Smith's box. She'd be like, back at corner box number 3. Like, this bitch knows.
Like, she knows. Like, this bitch absolutely knows.
Like, if I'm ever in trouble with an attorney, I hope you got money to afford Rebecca.
You're right, because this girl knows. Like, this woman is in it, let me tell you.
If she wants a box of my life in her garage just to be safe, I'll give her one.
I'm telling you. So, all right. So, now, we move from that scene. And again, some of this is a little, because, you know, some of it is partly them showing you what is happening through them filming this. And so, then we move on to a little snippet of something that basically talks about Joe. So Joe is probably more close to what you have seen portrayed in, you know, any reenactment of documentary of someone who's been traumatized. He is an amputee, and he was actually abused by 3 priests, okay? And it actually names these individuals. So it's Thomas O'Brien, Mark Hunhart, and Thomas Reardon, right? What I liked about Joe is that even though he has went through this thing, he has made it his life purpose to work with children who have been abused, neglected, abandoned. Like, that is what he does. Like, he, in some ways, he is the superhero, right? Like, right. He's the one who has taken the pain that he has and says, you know what, no more for any child that I can help. And that's what he does. And so what they start talking about with him is, and what he's wanting to confront is the lake house in which he was basically abused. He talks about how, you know, for a while, suddenly he just started having nightmares, but what he realizes now, these nightmares were actually memories coming to surface. And that to me is like, I can't even imagine, like, you know, I don't sleep well now. Like, imagine that being your life, where night after night, you're literally having nightmares of your abuse.
I mean, talking about living your nightmare.
Absolutely.
Know, and that's already happened, and now you're reliving it over and over again in your sleep.
In your sleep.
So that shows that there's no safe place for these people.
Right.
There's no safe. There's no safe place.
There's no safe place.
Not even in your home and in your bed asleep.
Right. I think even at one point he talks about how sometimes his nightmares would even morph into something like he would be chased by like cowboys and Indians. Well, he says Indians. I'm going to say Native Americans.
Things have changed, sir.
Yes, things have changed. And he's running toward the house, and he's like, if I can get to this house, then I will be safe. But then he gets into the house, and there are his abusers. And really what happened was it was all a setup to beginning. He was being chased by this dangerous entity, we're going to say, and it was really just to lure him to another unsafe place. And so I just thought to myself, man, that is so hard to live with. Like, I just can't even imagine. Later, what we see is that they actually find that house and take him to it. You know, he can't go in, but he goes up to the porch and he peeks in, and once he confronts it, nightmares go away. Like, once he forces himself to go there, to do it, nightmares go.
I analyze things like crazy, and half the time it's probably not even right, but I was thinking, when you had the cowboys and Indians, as he called them, chasing him into this house where, there's more bad guys, to me, it kind of represented that, his family and everybody's like, you gotta go to church, you gotta go to church, you gotta go to church. So he's being chased to this building where these abusers are. And, and then you have now even, the judicial systems that's like, well, it's no longer a factor, or we don't believe you. And, and so there's always these bad guys that are chasing right back to these bad guys. And that structure was a home, where you would think that you were safe. That church is a dwelling where you think that you'd be safe. And that's where this unimaginable acts are happening. And it's just heartbreaking.
It is heartbreaking. And I'm glad you said that. So that actually kind of takes us into the next scene that actually happens right after all of this, right? So then we have Edian, and he's talking about how he wants his scene to be shot. And so he's talking about hands, like the symbolism of the hands, like how, there's so much that happens with hands in the Catholic Church and all these rituals that happen. And he says he wants to show, these ritualistic things that are supposed to be holy, that are supposed to help bring us closer to God, but then flash to hands of, the same priest or whatever jerking down my pants. And he says, is this right? It shouldn't be, but this person who's doing this is the very definition of what right is supposed to be. And he was like, who can I check in with? He was like, I don't have anybody I can check in. He was like, and this is the thing that caught me with him. He said, I've been checking in with God. Or he says checking in with God wasn't working. He said, he basically had no one that he could check with. Like, that to me was just like gut-wrenching. The fact that he thought, like, he was like, who do I go to? Like, this person is supposed to be the definition of all that's holy, all that's right. Yeah. It doesn't seem like this should be happening to me, but it is.
Yeah, it's like when you think of, like, the chain of command, it's like you have the priest, and that's the person that helps you get into heaven. And this person is the act of the devil.
Right, like, it just... It to me, that was just so, like, holy.
They had, all of them had their own quotes at some point here and there that is just gut-wrenching,
Right, it just absolutely was. So then we flash forward to Michael, your boy Michael, our queen baby. And they basically talk about where his abuse took place. It took place in the swimming pool with Father Tyranny. And so basically he takes him to this pool, he abuses him, and then he basically, when he takes him home, he tells him nothing happened. This is just something that happens with special friends and priests, and tells him that he can't say anything to his parents. Like, just sends him on home. And then when his mom questions, why is his eyes red? Like, he looked like he had been crying, and he just, basically told her, oh, it's because of chlorine from the pool. Because this person with this power that he's supposed to respect, right? Like, you're supposed to do what they tell you to do. Told him that he couldn't say anything. Like, and again, he's another person still waiting for his abuser to be removed from priesthood. Still nothing. Like, it just, to me, and I think the other sad part about his was, like, a lot of these individuals are going to locations to kind of confront that past, to kind of not put it behind them, but, so that they know that they have power over this location. The pool in which it happened was torn down. He can't confront it.
I hope that one thing that I really liked about this documentary is they did not mind a bit to mention the bad people's names. I love that. And I hope that is a sense of justice for these gentlemen because they get to, on their platform that they've created, get to call them out by name.
Yeah, and as they should be able to, you know, it's so frustrating sometimes when there's no justice for anyone and then it just gets swept under the table. Like there's not even anything that, you know, you feel like you can do. At least this gives them some kind of power to say, you know what, I'm going to put this out there in the universe.
Yeah. Because, you know, when people hear about this, even when it's someone that you're close to, you know, it's kind of like when someone dies. You usually have the 3 days and you're smothering the person that is closest to one that passed.
Mm-hmm.
And so for those 3 days, the widow or whoever the case may be that's closest to is just so busy and so numb and so much going on that they're not really getting to mourn yet. Well, then after those 3 days, everyone goes to work. And that person goes to make 2 pots of coffee. Realize they only have to make 1 now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's when the dust is settling for everyone else. But that person, the dust is far from settling because they're now getting into that, what their new routine is going to be. I don't have to make 2 cups of coffee.
Right.
I want to.
But you can't.
But I can't.
Or you should.
And right. And so it's... What I always try to remind people is, and this is probably an example with these guys, is dust don't settle for us on this.
No, it's there forever.
Yeah.
You just find a way, hopefully, not all, and not everyone, but hopefully you find a way to manage it, but it never goes away. And
the one that you like so well, the one that's angry, and I love him too. But what scares me for him is the amount of anger shows that he hasn't been able to really move forward. There's no sense of peace for himself.
No, there's definitely not. And as a matter of fact, I'm glad you brought that up because moving forward a little bit, past a few things, one of the things that they cut to is my boy Mike is doing some like heavy rocking back and forth. Like he's got like some heavy rock going on and he is just like rocking the hell out of himself back and forth. Like some stuff that is not, you guys, like it is not normal. And I hate to say not normal because I don't want to, anyone who has been through what he has been through, they have to find ways to cope, right? So I don't want to make it sound like, you know, oh, he's off his rocker. That's not what I'm trying to say.
And I don't think that's what you're meaning by the word normal. It's not healthy. You know, you and I were touched on this in the beginning. I'm afraid this man's going to have a heart attack. And what really pisses me off about that is if that happens, their fingerprints, the priests, are all over this man's dead body. They won. You know, he is now dead and they were his killer.
Right.
You know, which is where the peace and stuff comes in. Like, that forgiveness is not for it's for yourself. It's for the victim. You know, when he's not getting there and it's terrifying me for his health.
Right.
So when you're saying normal, I think, like, I'm understanding it as in it's not healthy. It's not good for him.
Right. Because, he is rocking back and forth. And so I think they've asked him, you know, at some point, like, how long has he been doing this? Because, like, when you guys, like, when you go and watch the documentary, you'll see what I'm saying. And he basically said that this has been happening since that time. Like, he had no place to put, you know, all the things that have built up. And he'll basically tell you, he was like, if I don't do this, I'm not right.
And you can tell this wasn't a documentary thing. It wasn't something that he started doing 2 hours into filming. You can tell this is something that he's been doing for a long time. Like his body there's some kind of trigger and his body knows to just start
like
rocking.
he's got to do it. He's got to do it. And if he doesn't do it, he's not right. He also talks about about his therapist talking about that this is his way of putting himself into a dissociative state. You know, it's just incredibly sad to watch. He even mentions at some point, like, he mentions at one point talking to his dad. He calls his dad by his name. He says to his dad, has it never dawned on you that I've never had a single romantic relationship? Like, you just think about this. This man has went through his life refusing to have, or maybe it's not that he's refused. It may be that nobody has the mental capacity to really deal with him because
I'm sure all that plays a factor.
Right, because he's so angry. He was like, and he tells you, and we've said it before, like he's convinced that if this had not happened happen to him. He would have children, he would have grandchildren, his life would be so much different, but because it happened, he can't get past it. And then, on top of the abuse, then he has to go through a different type of abuse from the Catholic Church in basically saying, not believing his story, right? And I think that's the thing that burns him, like it's like burning deep into his soul, that these people do not believe what I am telling them, or they believe, or better yet, as he says, they believe it, they know it's true, they just like to cover it up.
Mm-hmm. They don't give a damn.
Yeah.
And who else is it happening to during this time that you're ignoring me and not caring?
Right.
And what scares me for the way that he's acting, and I'm hoping this documentary is going to bring him some kind of peace and comfort, you know, especially like after, because I think we find those moments, and we see those moments with him where, you know, it's like, okay, he just took a deep breath.
Right.
He's reeling
Oh
it
yeah,
in.
we definitely see that. Like, there's definitely a side to him that is like yes, we see the vitriol, we see the anger, we see all of that, but there's definitely there's another side to him. And the reason that I bring that up is because in one of the scenes that we'll talk about, there's a line that he mentions where he says, "Don't blame mom." And let's talk about mom, because mom, look, he's a better person than I am, is what I'm going to say, because he says, "Don't blame mom." Mom, I'm sorry, I'm blaming mom. So his story was this. So he was once at a different, and now I will say they go into part of his story. They don't go into all of the details. Some of the details that I'm getting ready to tell you is actually from that www.iamnotcatholic.com, because again, I so had to go and look at it.
I love that you know how to use the Goog machine.
But so he was in public school, basically, from what I understand, and he loved it. He played baseball, he played football, he was a happy child. Then his mom started getting active in the church, and then he transferred him into a Catholic school, basically. And he said there was something about this place that he just did not like. From the time that he got there, he started skipping school, this, that, or the other. And so someone had suggested to his mother that he should go seek therapy, like do therapy with priests. So that's the setup. So what they actually mention in the documentary is that his mom drops him off to the priest therapist, and that's where he was abused. What happened was he was literally told when he got there to lay on the floor and close his eyes. And before this poor kid knew it, this priest was on top of him, sexually assaulting him, trying to stick his tongue down his throat. Now, the documentary doesn't go into details. Website?
He does. www.
Exactly.
In case you missed that.
IamNotCatholic.com.
I wonder if he had to fight for that name or if it was just open.
I don't know.
Do you think like what is it? GoDaddy called him and was like, "Are you sure this is what?"
I know, like, this is what you want. He's like, "Yes, this is what I want." And so, but he basically paints this picture of this priest trying to stick his tongue down his throat. He immediately closes off his mouth, so he starts licking his face and like salivating all over him, this, that, or the other. And then when the priest was done, he goes and gets this pillow shaped like a ball and tells him to hit him with it. It'll help you with your anger. Like, it's very bizarre shit. Like, what the hell? And then he said, again, not all of this is in the documentary, but he says he remembers the pastor, I keep wanting to call him the pastor, but he's a priest, in the fetal position. Like, while he's asking him to hit him with this pillow. Like it just really, really, really bizarre. And then when he leaves, he tells the kid, "Don't tell your parents about this because they're not going to understand my therapy message." Well, bitch, no! Nobody's going to understand your therapy message. You want to pin down a child.
So I want your opinion on this. Some people will react differently to a sexual interaction, right? And so when this priest is in the fetal position saying, "Hit me, beat me with this pillow," you know how like some people will cry after sex and they feel a bit of guilt? I want where my mind kind of went was, did something like this abuse happen to him and he's acting out? Not that this justifies any of it at all. If you commit the crime, you do the time, right. But usually victims of sexual assault have also been sexually assaulted.
Right.
And so I wondered if some people cry or some people might cut themselves after or whatever the case may be, if if he was like, okay, now take this pillow, and I'm going to get into this weak, vulnerable state of curled up ball of emotional mess, and you beat me, and if that is his way of punishing himself for doing something, you know what I'm saying?
I mean, it could be, like, I will tell you what it reminded me of, and sorry if you guys don't get this reference, but, so, a lot of us here in the U.S. were forced to read a story called The Scarlet Letter, right? And so the religious figure that Hester Prynne, I believe is the name of the main character, has this baby with, right? So she's wearing the scarlet A because it's obvious that she has fornicated, as they would call it back in those days. She's, had this child out of wedlock or whatever, and has been branded now. But this religious figure, never comes out to take responsibility, right? He doesn't. But what he does is he flogs himself. And so that's kind of what it reminded me of. But instead of him flogging himself, he's having someone else do the flogging. Mm-hmm. Like, it was just, I don't know, that was like the initial imagery that I just got when I was reading the story. I was like, this is some weird, bizarre stuff. And then get this, you guys. This shit, mama. So Mike has always been a bit of a pistol, and he was like, bitch, no, I'm not getting ready to not tell somebody. So he tells his mom. Now, the pastor does tell him, or the priest does tell him that, hey, if you tell your dad, like, they might get mad and, something might land them in jail. Well, you think, bitch? Well, like, what are you talking about? So, but he still goes and tells mom. And mom agrees with the priest. Like, yeah, we probably shouldn't tell dad this. And so he doesn't tell dad because mom now has roped him into not telling. And you know what his mother does? His mother sends him back. Okay, it's bad enough that we're not going to tell dad, right? We're not going to tell the one person who might actually go seek justice, right? But then she sends this poor boy back with the baked cake. With a baked cake. Not, you sent your child back to his abuser with a present.
Yeah. Which...
oh, thank you. Do this to my child again.
And cross even more lines. Take it a little bit further. Not that... But it's almost like, in my mind, when people get away with something, they test the waters a little more. You're giving him full range.
At this point, yeah, because you've done whatever. And apparently, whatever happened with this second therapy session, he still has not recovered those memories. And so, in his mind, it could only be much worse than... Can you imagine sending your child back? Like, I don't have kids. I will be the first one to say that I don't have great maternal instincts.
Hashtag not a mother.
Yes, right. Hashtag
www.notamother.
I do not have kids, do you hear me? But I'm pretty sure I'm not going to go send my child back to his abuser.
No. I had mentioned how I hope that this documentary, they find a little bit of peace with it. Because I do worry about his health. Mm-hmm. But then there's also that part of me... And you all know this about me. We've talked about it several times during this podcast already today, but I overanalyze things, and I can take things to a 10, but I also think that's part of my PTSD, and I think that's part of how I've been trained of now the other shoes dropping, There are going to be negative comments about this documentary. Regardless of how great it is, there are going to be negative things said. I am terrified that for someone like Mike, who has all this anger, if he's going to say, you know what, fuck it. And he takes the law in his own hands.
I mean, he basically goes and says that I am by myself most of the time. And I think at one point, and I believe his father has passed away, but he pretty much says that Doug, his dad, because he calls him by his first name, is the only person who has had the mental capacity to actually deal with him, like to listen to him, because it always goes back to the same thing. Like he can't, like so let's go backwards a bit. When we talk about Miss Monica, talking about how she thinks of trauma, the sticky thing that keeps you stuck, that's exactly him. Like, he is stuck because he keeps on seeking justice, but he never gets it.
Because one of the points that really impacted me, and I feel like now might be the time. So basically what happened was they were talking about the reenactment. So here we get to where
they asked him, would you want to reenact the independent review board, that kind of, and he was like, absolutely, that's what I want to do. Like, he was on board with that. And then Dan was saying that his story was similar. Like, he also had to go before this review, but it was him and his brother, and they're having. And now, from his perspective, it's a little bit different, right? They're still kind of young, and he's like, we're having to tell these stories that we haven't even told each other. And then we're having to be in front of these people, and then that's when the guy hits him with the, well, tell your mother I'm sorry. And I'm like, and he's like, well, you tell her that I'm sorry. And here's the thing, he went, you tell her. And I was thinking to myself, and they don't say this, and no one brings this up in the documentary, but to me, I was thinking, why didn't they apologize to them?
Right.
Right, you said, tell your mother we're sorry. Bitch, no, apologize to me.
And the part that, like, I'm actually getting teared up with this, because when he said it, you could tell that he had anger for his mother, but you could tell that he didn't want to, that she is also a victim of them, just a different way,
right.
a mental way, because he said, you tell my mother you're sorry, because
she still believes in you. Woo! And I will tell you, and now, so they did actually have Dan's mother on there. And so I think Dan at one point even asked his mom, do you remember when I first told you about it? She's completely blocked it out. She mentions that at one point she wanted to commit suicide, but she just completely, like, she didn't know. Don't get me wrong, she didn't do what Mike's mom and said, hey, let's take you back to your abuser. Like, it was none of that. But she completely was just like, she just blocked it out. Like, yeah. She just... And I will say that one of the things, so you have Mike Foreman, you have Dan, and you have Michael, who all of them basically, you know, there was this fear for their family members blaming themselves. So, like, you have Mike, like I said, even though Mike is angry as he is, it's justified, but he's a better person than I am, because he's, you know, basically he's like, don't blame mom. She was just brainwashed by these folks. That's what he has in his head. Dan also was like, it's not your fault. Like, you know, he even tells his brother, because at one point he, you know, his brother was also abused, and his brother was his older brother, and, you know, thought, you know, wanted to be a protector for his little brother. He was like, it's not your fault. And even, you know, Michael, he's like, at one point he's like, you know, whatever happens from this, what I don't want to happen is for them to feel guilty. Like, I don't want them to be upset. This is a thing that happened. It wasn't their fault. And I do think that is important, and here's why. I think, so when we start talking about Dan's mom, who completely blocked it out, who just doesn't even remember the first time he told her, like, there was probably an incredible amount of guilt there. And I think they have to also remember it's not their fault. Now, it's their fault if they take them back to their abuser. You know, even though, again, Mike, you know, my man, like, again, better person than I am, saying don't blame mom. But in most cases, it's not their fault. What should happen is, okay, my child has told me this. What are my actions next?
Right.
What do we do for this child? How do I stand up for my child?
That's and part of me thought, you know, when he was saying, don't blame the mom, don't blame moms, a part of me was like, is it because this church that was supposed to be a safe place was stolen from you? And now your mother, who turned a blind eye or blocked things out or sent you with a cake, you know, like, that's no longer a safe place, and you're just starving for this safe place, that you can't be mad at mom, because if you are, then you lose that too.
You lose that too. Well, and I think, like I said, like, for Dan's mom, I think that's the case. Like, she blocked it out. Like, she probably had so much guilt, she didn't know what to do, right? Like, how can I let this have my child, you know, let this happen to my child? And so, and rather doing something about it, the easier thing, or her way of coping with it, was to just block it out, right? That was her, you know, because I'm supposed to be your protector. I have let you down in an unimaginable way, right? Yeah. By letting you go. Like, even though she technically had no control over the actions of these other people, like, she blamed herself, right, for this happening. Again, Mike's mom, I'm sorry, Mike. Like, again, how do you take in that information and then you just say, go on back, go and get it again? Like, yeah. Like, where do they do that at?
And that makes me wonder, again, it's one of those situations where it makes me wonder, what abuse have you suffered? And were you sent back? were, you know,
right?
like,
And I dealt with it, and so why shouldn't you?
right.
That kind of thing, like,
because I think what we forget sometimes as a society is that when someone is a mom or a dad, you know, they're always this superhero in your mind. They're not Dawn or Scott. They're mom and dad. And we forget that mom and dad are also human, and mom and dad also have their experiences, and they have their lives, and they're gonna fuck up sometimes.
Oh, absolutely.
And their traumas and PTSD is going to play a factor. Not to mention, they are also a victim of, because these priests that are preaching stuff, you know, and in the back molesting boys in between sermons. It's also like, so I'm sure they're saying things in a certain way that's brainwashing to people. You know what I mean?
They feel like you're holier than, and that's what Mike brings up. He brings up that his mom was so brainwashed by them that he thought that they were actually God, which is why he says not to blame them.
And one thing that also needs to be taken into consideration too is, yes, this documentary was filmed 2020, 2021, but these boys were 6, 7, 8 years ago, or 6, 7, 8 years old when this started happening, and the oldest one I think is 62. So think of the time then where women's rights were and what women was allowed, and I don't even want to, yes, allowed, but even with things evolving, you know, you had that traditional household, you know, where the you know, and then in a lot of churches, women wasn't supposed to speak, you know, and so when you have all of that playing a factor too, which I don't think we really got reminded about.
Right, well, and if you think about it, so things were not the way that they are now, but even with mental health, like there was things that you just didn't talk about, right? And so there is probably some of that playing a role in some of this. It's just growing up in the family that I grew up. That's why I find her heart like completely like that just dumbfounded me. That
100%. I'm not trying to justify by any means. I would love to say that regardless of what situation I was in, let my kid walk in here and tell me that. I don't care if I'm not supposed to talk in your church or not. I don't care if you have a sign out or a protester that says, everybody's welcome here but David.com.
www.
I'm coming inside that motherfucker, and we're going to have words, at least.
Right.
You know, so I would love to say that I'm that person, but you don't know until you're in it. Like, let's say I had children now. They would be a product of their discipline, and some of their treatments would be a product of what I've learned through my trauma. You know, and there would also be bad habits that would be taught to them because of, and they would end up being a victim because of, and that doesn't justify it, you know, by any means, but it's what life, I mean, it's life, unfortunately.
It's life, right. Absolutely, life is messy. That's what makes it beautiful sometimes. We go from Mike talking about how he wants to do the reenactment of the Independent Review to Lake Viking. So Lake Viking was the place where Joe, our amputee, was abused. Can I take a minute to talk about, I don't know what the cameraman was doing, but there is this shot of these weird fish.
I know. I knew what you were going to say.
It's like, what is happening?
How did they find that?
How did they find that? And why did they think that, oh, let's put this into the documentary?
I know. We don't have time to edit. We're just going to leave that in there.
We're just going to leave it. I don't know what the hell that was. And I was like, are these fish dead? Like, what is this? Like, what is happening here? Why? And they stay on it way longer than they should. Right. It's not even like a flash and then we're gone. It's like, oh, hey, here's these dead whatever fishes. I don't know.
Because you know what they thought? Someone like David Keck is going to do a podcast about this, and you know he's an overanalyzer and thinker, so if we hold it just for 3 more seconds, he's going to build this whole narrative of this represents their souls. And
oh my God.
Because that's exactly where my mind went, so they were right.
Then we flash to the kid. So there is this kid. So what they decided to do. So they were first kind of auditioning kids for these parts, and then what they thought that they should do was land on just having one kid play all the parts. Because in, I believe Dan's word, I could be wrong about that. He says we are all that one boy, right? And so there's this kid Tarek who he really, really kind of, like, he sees himself in this kid. He's like, there's something divine about that little kid. Like, he was like, and I just, like, he was like, I feel like that was me when I was a kid. And there's this line that they have all the kids say, and it's just something about the way that the kid says it that he's like, that's the one. And it is, forgive me, Father, for I have failed in doing right and succeeded in doing wrong. Because this kid is doing a confession. And there's something in Tarek's eyes, and you can see it, like, Tarek's a little shit. Like, he's in, like, there's innocence there, but you could, like seeing what Dan holding the door, you know, on Michael, like, trying to shut him in, that's this kid. Like, that is this kid.
Yeah. It was very old soul shit. Like, when he said that, I was like, ooh, this ain't his first time here. Like, very impactful.
Right. Like, it just, and so now what I will say, so something else about Tarek is his parents. So they interview the parents a little bit, and the parents, like, really toiled on letting him do this part. Like, they were like, we're not even going to tell him about it. Like, this stuff is too heavy. They slept on it, and then they're like, I guess we'll tell him about it, and we'll talk to him about it. And, like, they are literally toiling it. Meanwhile, this kid is like, dude, like, that's not my reality. And they're like, but it really happened. He was like, so? Like, it's not happening to me. Like, this kid is just like...
Yeah.
Like...
And thank God.
Right. Oh, absolutely. Thank God.
But for him to be able to... I can't wait to see where he goes in the future, because for him to be able to embrace that and not have experienced it is, like, shows his talent.
Right. Well, and just to know that there is still innocence there. I think that's what I like.
Yeah.
Like, and I think that was also good for the actual shooting of this, right? Like, there's this kid that has this innocence that's now being taken away. Now, luckily, in Tarek's case, it's not really being taken away. Right. But he has that innocence. Like, he's just
But it's
like,
showing him what's out there.
Right.
And so there is a part that is being taken from him, you know? But at the same time, it's one of those lessons where he will now know signs, where something like that's about to happen to him, and he'll know exactly that mom and dad look. Which he also seemed like one of those that wouldn't have to go to mom and dad, that he could handle himself. You know?
Like, he's like, nah, this ain't happening, bro.
I felt like I wouldn't want to meet this 7-year-old in the dark alley.
I know. All right. So after that, we get to the body of Christ scene. And this is where we kind of come full circle, and we're starting to get into the scene that was shot at the beginning. So what you have is kind of these kids giving the body of Christ, you know, he's giving out, you know, the wafer or this, that, or the other, kind of what they would normally do. And then the priest takes the kid, Tarek's character, because this is actually Tarek playing a character at this point, takes him back, and gives him actual alcohol, like says, here, boy, have a drink with me. Like, and we're not talking about, like, a little bit of the wine, like the blood of Christ. No, that's not what we're doing here. We're talking about, like, brandy, bourbon, or something.
Right. Like, we took this part out of the Bible, but God actually turned into whiskey. Chug this. You
Right.
know?
And then he says, now it's your turn to disrobe, boy. And so the kid kind of looks at him like, is he looking at me? And he's, like, giving him, like, just, like... Now, I have to give it to Tom. So, Tom was, who did a lot of the acting, who had also been abused. My man, I mean, he played his character. Like, I felt like he was a creepy old priest looking at this kid.
But that's the guy that, those are the eyes and the face and the mannerisms that he has seen every night in his dreams.
You're right, because he was just like...
He knows that guy.
He knows that guy. That's exactly right. Like, he knows that guy. And just something else to kind of give you guys an idea. So, we don't talk a lot about Tom, and that's because Tom can't actually reenact any of the things that has happened to him, because at the time that this was being made, his stuff was still being investigated in the courts and in the Vatican, as a matter of fact. Like, that's how deep this has went. So he can't really say much about his particular situation. And so his way of being able to contribute was to do a lot of the acting. He didn't do it all. There is a scene that actual Michael, our queen, does. But that was his way to contribute. And let me tell you, you're exactly right. This is what he has seen in his nightmares every night. Yeah. Because when I tell you, like, I felt like I kind of felt some kind of way. Like, did he really? Like, no. Like, that's creepy. Like, that is super, super creepy. So So we have that. And so then we move on kind of, and then we kind of get into the scene that happens at the beginning. And then, you know, the kid running up and he's standing and everybody's looking. I don't know that if anybody catches on to this, but I'm going to tell you what kind of freaked me out a little bit about that scene. You know, yes, there was the green glowing eyes. Like, that was like, but the kid's ears were just glowing red. Like, I know they weren't really red. It was because of the lighting behind him. But it kind of magnified to me this thought of him feeling like everybody is looking. You know how somebody gets embarrassed and they're red in the face or whatever the case may be?
And your ears will burn.
Like, that's what I kind of felt like with him. Like, he's up there, everyone's staring at him. And, you know, and now these people were now the enablers because, you know, this bad thing has happened. And they're just, you know, staring at him like he's the problem.
Well, and remember in the beginning when we talked about this and I said, you know, throughout the show, it kind of became full circle on what it meant. Because at first I was like, what is this? What does this thing mean? And so now's where it's getting to the part to where I'm like, oh, light bulbs. Because, and when I was breaking it down and thinking about it, you know, it's like every parent, every authority figure, all eyes were on him. But no one knew why he was acting the way he was acting. No one really understood why he ran off.
Right.
No one understood what his fear was, but they were all looking at him, judging him. And so were his peers who were also being molested and traumatized. They were also looking at him in that judgmental state. And the same shit's happening to them. You know, that's how I was taking it, you know, and so, of course, like, your ears are burning because you're embarrassed, you're angry, you know, and it just, again, this documentary really triggered me a lot. And it reminded me how I felt in the courtroom. And everyone was looking at me. I had no idea who any of these people were. They all knew all this shit about me. And I'm expected to do this and act a certain way. And I don't know how to fucking do it. And that was a trigger for me.
Yeah, and I'm going to tell you, that just kind of, I don't know, that imagery just like I still see that kid. Like, that's just crazy to me. Then from there, we have a few other things that happen. But I'm going to flash forward to our boy Tom in the confessional scene. So we see Tom throughout this documentary, and for the most part, you know, you see him in the beginning and he breaks down and cries. He's 62 years old and it's still affecting him. But for the most part, he's a pretty calm presence throughout this whole thing until they're getting ready to film the confessional scene. And he gets in there and there is this lock in the confessional. And he cannot process why there would be a need for this lock in the confessional. And he snaps. I mean, he doesn't have, now it's not a snap like Mike snaps, like, you know what I mean? But you go from this very calm presence to this guy who's suddenly pissed off at this thing. Like, you know, and it just, you know, and he can't really talk about it because, again, you know, his stuff is so, you know, is still being investigated. So he can't just really let out all the things that he wants to say. And at one point he even apologized because I think he punched it or something like that. But it just, you know, like the things that will trigger you. That's what I took from that.
And I hated it for him too because he put himself in this situation to better himself and to hopefully help other people. But he had to be very calculated on every word that he said, every emotion. And so here he is. And it kind of goes back to the guy when they said all the other 13-year-old kids are able to talk about being 13 and I can't. Now here he is. All these people that have went through the same shit he's went through is able to show their emotions and get it out. And I can't.
And he can't. And then it also just shows, you know, the little things that will trigger you sometimes. So like, you know, people who don't understand trauma and PTSD and things of that nature, you know, and I'll be the first one to say that I don't fully understand it myself. But it to me, what people should take away from this is that you need to look upon people with understanding because you don't know what might set them off. Like, who knew that this little lock was going to set this man off?
Because people do think that a trigger is going to be... People associate triggers with guns. And guns have a big, loud bang and sometimes a very unhappy ending, right? And so when you hear the word trigger, you associate it with that. And you think that it's got to be a Mack truck hitting a train And no, it
Right.
could be the slam of a cabinet door.
Right, and it sets someone
It
off.
could be the clinking of a knife on a wine glass, you know.
And that's it. And that was what I found fascinating. Like, he just snapped. So then, but he continues to get, like, my boy Tom, like, he's like, but I'm going to power through it because I've got to. He was like, because, at one point, they have a therapist there. They're asking him, hey, do you want to stop? And he's like, no. He's like, I'm going to push through. He was like, this is the way that I can help, so I'm going to do it. And I can't say, like, dude, you're my hero, because I would have been like, nope, I'm done, I'm out. Y'all probably not going to see me for a while. I need to go sit in therapy right now. But he does. He pushes through. And there, at one point, Joe asked him to get, he was like, can you get angry? Like, basically, he wants for him to basically show control over this child who's on the other side of the confessional. It just breaks my heart. And he was like, well, what do you want me to get mad at? He was like, I want you to use the anger at that lock to basically use it against this kid. Like, basically, and I think he even gives him a specific line, and I'm going to paraphrase here, but the line basically is like, if you tell anybody about our special relationship, your mom, your family, you will all be kicked out of the church and you'll go to hell. Like, what kind of shit is that?
Putting that pressure on a child.
Right. Like that is like just dumbfounded me. And the fact that, that was something similar that was said to Ed. Like, because that was the reason that he gave him specifically the line. Was because that was what was told to him. If you tell anyone about our relationship, then you're being kicked out of the church and you're going to hell.
And you're taking your mom and dad with you.
And your mom and dad are going with you.
Yeah.
Like, that just, man, it just... that just killed me.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It is a lot. Like, the whole documentary just was like, man. But on a lighter note, we're gonna scoot just past that scene. And how about my man Ed on the speed bag boxing? What? I was like, go Ed, look at you. Okay,
Right.
I see you.
Yeah, like, I was like, maybe I should try that. Like, he was so good at it. And it seemed very therapeutic.
It did seem therapeutic. I have hit a speed bag before. I do not have... Look, I have great rhythm when it comes to dancing, but when it comes to hitting one of those speed bags, Keona ain't got it. Like, let me tell you.
I don't think that I would either. I think, like, I would come into work on Monday, my eyes would be black, my nose would have blood on it, and you'd be like, what the hell happened to you? And I tried to, what was it called, speed bagging?
Yeah, it's a speed bag, is what it's called. Man.
Not teabagging, it's speed bag.
No, yeah, that is something else, David. David, get your life, okay?
I hope that we don't come across that documentary.
That's something completely different. But anywho, so I just had to call that out just because I just thought, what? Like, they just keep on giving little tidbits of random things.
I mean, you have to, especially in such a dark little thing, something that you can, because even though that's not necessarily funny, but it's showing ways to cope and deal and manage, which is a positive that needs to be addressed as well.
Right, absolutely. Now we get to Mike talking about his mom and how she took them back, and so that they're actually going to play a scene where they have Tarek and actually got Tarek's mom play the mom of Mike, and Tarek, since Tarek is playing that part, and they had Tarek's dad play the priest. And so they shoot a scene really quick, just showing the mom, basically dropping him back off to the priest. And he's like, Mom, I really don't want to go there. And she says, he's trying to help you. Again, this whole situation just tore me up. I could stay on that forever. I'm going to move on because I'm going to tell you, I'm with him when it just makes my blood boil every time I think about that. Moving on. So then we move on back to Dan. And Dan's mom, and again, we talked about this a little bit as well. And, she felt, how blind could I be? And then who we haven't talked a bit about is Dan's brother, Tim. Tim just, he said that at one point he just felt like he deserved it. Like he, not necessarily, he knew it was wrong, but he felt like he did something at some point that he must deserve this.
It was some form of punishment for something that he had done.
Right, that he had done. And that to me was also heartbreaking.
And very common.
Yes, like, people, they feel this guilt and this shame, like, Like they're such a bad person that I deserve that this should happen to me. Or even if they don't think that they're a bad person, they just think that, oh, I messed up this time, and so this is the retribution for that one thing that I did wrong. All right, so moving on. So shortly after we talked to Tim, and he's talking about how he felt deserved, we get into Dan and the fishing rod incident. This shit.
Trigger warning.
Oh my God, is it ever? So Dan basically was given a fishing rod to use by Father Monahan, but the fishing rod actually belonged to someone else. Dan ends up breaking this fishing rod. And basically what happens when he brings the fishing rod to Father Monahan to tell him or that, he's broken it, he basically tells this kid that, well, this was not my fishing rod, and because you have broken it, you're basically going to have sex with this other guy to pay for it, basically. Like, this is a kid in the 5th grade, and you basically told him in order for payment, you're going to have to perform sexual acts in order to pay for this fishing rod. Not, hey, let's go, see, your mother, or you're going to have to work
right.
off, whatever.
Get the rake, go outside and rake the leaves and earn $20. And
whatever. No, you're going to have to perform sexual acts. And not for me.
I'm passing you on.
Was absolutely dumbfounded. And so when his mom talks about committing suicide and her, blocking this out, if my kid, I don't know that I would have blocked it out, but yeah, I probably would have wanted to commit suicide. I have failed to protect this child. And to know that he had to perform acts not only for this priest, but now for a complete stranger. That being said, so moving along. So what happens next is, so they're going to go, he and his brother are going to search for the location of their abuse. And this is where it gets a little, so what I'm going to say from an outside perspective, I didn't quite understand what was going on at first and why they were so upset at first.
Michael's always saving the day.
I'm telling you, Michael is that boy to kind of just, something that he said is what kind of oh, okay, I get it now. So they're going to look for this location, but they can't get back to it. For whatever reason, they know that it was a Swiss kind of type house, but they can't remember exactly where it is. And so they go riding around, they go investigating, they go asking questions, and they come to their first location, and it looks similar to where they remembered that they were abused, but it doesn't look exactly like that, right? Now, mind you, this is also years upon years upon years later, and I don't know that they took that into consideration right off bat, but they go around and they can't really find it. And what happens is they are both Tim and Dan are in a place of, I don't know, confusion is not the word, but they're almost let down because, they've seen the therapy, this work, for the rest of the guys where they're getting to go confront, but they can't find their place.
Right.
And then it also makes them feel as if, because it goes back to that whole being believed, right? If I can't find this place, did it really happen? And so it took me a while to get there, but I got there because of Michael, because Michael was like, look, we need to make sure that when we go to a location that we actually can find it. That's the first thing, because he basically goes to say, you guys aren't crazy. That's not what it is. It was but I do understand that, it makes you feel that way. It just, you guys want to find it so bad. And then for poor Dan, because he hadn't talked to his brother, it made him feel like he drug up a bunch of memories for him without any payoff.
Right.
And so he was really, really worried about that. Oh my God,
I thought I was going to help fix you, and I made it worse. And so, they eventually end up going to look for it again. And then they see, but this time they're on a boat, and they can see the place or whatever the case may be, and they're like, look at those stairs, that's it. And then turns out to be the very first place that they went to begin with. And so the owner comes out and says, hey, well, it didn't always look like this. Mm-hmm. There was something that was, that's now covered up that used to be here. And then as they start to explore, that's when it hits Dan that this is the path. This is where I broke the fishing rod. And so, saying all of that, that kind of was one of those things that I didn't really understand, but can you imagine for a person who is going to confront, this horrible thing in their past, but they can't find it. Right.
And then it's like basically it was almost like they started to question their sanity.
Yeah.
And that to me, like, from a victim standpoint, I feel like what happens with rape victims often is that they will gaslight you to test your sanity. And even though, no, they weren't being gaslit here, it was just, but that's what happens.
Well, and I felt like they think, I see this place in my dreams every night. Not realizing nature and time and man is going to be a factor in changing all of those. You know, and so when you're walking through it and you're like, well, there was these trees and there were these colors and those trees might not be there anymore.
Look, they were being gaslit by nature.
Yeah, yeah. You know, and so then it's like, what was I dreaming all of this? What, you know, like doubting yourself when you're the only person that really believed you and you found that you're the only person you could really trust. Now you have to doubt yourself.
Right.
You know, like it's...
I mean, it's so hard. Like,
and thank God they found it.
And thank God, could you imagine them going?
Because there for a minute, I was like, oh shit. I was like, they set this up for there to be they knew this was going well. And they were like, we need a part 2 of this documentary, so let's set this people up. You know? And I was like, don't do that to them. And then I saw it, and I was like, okay, I can breathe.
Yes. So then we cut, so what happens is now we cut to Mike, my boy Mike, who they are actually talking about how they're going to film his scene. But what he starts talking about first, before they get to the scene, is what actually happens, where he's forced to lay on the floor his first therapy session. But then it flashes to him talking to the review board, and look, I'm trying my very hardest to call him not by rat filth or filth rat, whatever he called him.
I think that is a deserving name.
Joseph Nauman. Where he basically states, so he's telling his story, and the guy keeps on hanging on to, but you had bad behavior before you saw the pastor or the priest, right? And it's like, I'm sitting here thinking, like, what the hell does it have to do with anything? He had bad behavior before he went to this priest. So because he had bad behavior, he deserved to be abused? Is that what you're trying to say?
He did not write 100 sentences when he should have been punished with only writing 50 sentences. Right. That's not...
Right. And basically what he has is this, you know, so then we get into him just basically reenacting this whole thing. Like, and to me, that, like, when that hit me, like, when they said that out loud, like, that killed me. Like, really? Like, this is what we're going to do? Like, you're going to Still confused. How does the bad behavior have anything to do with being abused?
That's why you want to go? Okay, I'm writing you a letter, and I will tell you.
Right. Well, they did write him a letter. And they told him that they couldn't substantiate his credibility.
Right.
So he just, you know, and that's what, of course, makes him snap. Now, what they do go, and I think this was very therapeutic for him, was then after they reenact what happened with this independent review board, they allow him to say what he felt like he should have said. And I wish y'all could see my face right now. Lord. At the time that this review happened. And when I tell you this boy goes in, look, he says so many words, so many 4-letter words. I'm not even going to go through most of that. But what I did catch on was one of the last things that he says was, look, I will never know the joy of having a child, but if I did, I would rather let a crack whore babysit. And I was like, not a crack whore, Mike. Not a crack whore. Then let y'all.
Could we... And let's help all the crack whores. Let's help them.
Right.
Don't want to babysit your kids.
Right. Not a
Don't
crack
let the
whore.
priest do it either. But, I mean, I'm sure there's a cousin. You know, Betty next door is lovely.
Right. Not a crack whore. Like, he just, like, and he went in. Now, he does, now, what I do like about him is that he does whisper to the kid, because Tarek is, so basically, let me set the scene up again for you guys, is it's got child Tarek, or Tarek, who is the actor. So basically it should be child Mike, played by Tarek, and then it has adult Mike. And basically what Mike is doing is standing up for child Mike. He's being a protector over the kid. And at one point, and like I said, he's letting, like, I'm talking about, like, just absolute disdain come out of his mouth. At one point, just kind of whispers to the kid, don't take this too serious. So there's goodness there.
I loved that moment too when he was, I mean, it's saying, look, I'm mad, I'm hurt, I'm angry, you're going to see a side of me, but
just don't take it too serious. Like,
you're safe, you're fine.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, he just, you know. And then after all is said and done, and this really kind of was like a heartwarming moment for me. You know, Eric, I think they asked Mike how he feels, and he says he feels so good. Like, he says it was like an elephant sitting on his chest. And then he asked the kid, you know, if he's okay. The kid says he's okay. But the thing that Tarek says to him, he says, I think he is strong, and I believe him 100%. And you should see Mike's face just kind of light up, like he's like, that meant a lot. So you can see that a lot of his issue comes from the fact that he wasn't believed. His mother made him, by taking him back, made him feel like he wasn't believed. Then this review board made him feel like he feels like, I can't prove that y'all believe me. I know, like, he feels like, I know y'all believe me, but y'all keep saying that you don't. Like, you're lying about this whole situation. I can't prove it, but you're lying, you know?
It really made me think a lot about the word believe, and I honestly felt like the greatest compliment that you could probably give anybody, and the greatest compliment that you could definitely give him, and he got it in closing, is saying, I believe you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that, like, I'm kind of getting choked up about it now. Like, because you're right, you could see this breath, this release, you know, and hearing those words that he's been wanting to hear for so long.
From someone who doesn't know him.
Yeah.
So now we move on to Ed's scene. So Ed's scene also has, my man Ed was doing a lot. So he has Michael, our queen, playing a scene for him. And so what you cut to is Michael in his robes, and he's getting prepared. But what was supposed to be portrayed is someone who is really pulling the wool over someone's eyes. It's not really, we're going out here to be holy. It's showtime. Like, yeah. He's the hustler. Like, and like at one point, he even looks in the mirror with his hands. He's like, it's showtime. And so then he goes out, and all you see are the hands. You see the hands that Ed was talking about earlier that he wanted to do. Hands. He's giving people the wafer. He's, you know, giving people the sip of the blood of Christ. You know, it's all about the hands. Like, he's doing all of these things. It doesn't mean a damn thing to him. It's just showtime for him. I'm putting on a show. This is what I'm going to do. All these people are eating this shit up. That's what's supposed to be portrayed. Then you flash to, and this is probably, for me, the most uncomfortable scene of the whole thing. To the point where I was so relieved when they yelled cut, I didn't know what to do with myself. And so you flash to the priest, and you're in an all brown room. We're talking about like 70s paneling looking stuff. And kid comes in, and he's asking him to help him pack. Now, the conversation first starts off like normal, like, hey, you know, how was school? How was your mom? You know, like, you know, we're thinking, okay, like, this is not that bad, right? Like, he's just asking normal questions. And then he's giving him orders saying, hey, grab this out of the drawer. Now put that in there. Now do this. Now do that. And then he says to the kid, and this is where it starts to get a little uncomfortable. He says to the kid, you need to do confession before I leave. The kid said, well, I did it last month. And he was like, tell me what you didn't confess, right? What have you done? So he tells him that he, you know, cheated on a test. He's been fighting with his brother. And he was like, you can't lie to me. Like, what else? He was like, tell me about the impure thoughts that you've been having about girls. And the kid is completely confused by now. Like, he's like, what? He was like, I don't know what you're talking about. He was like, and again, goes on to press him to say that he can't lie to him. And he was like, show me what you do when you think about girls. Now, mind you, at this point, we flashed. And so this brown room has now turned all white. The priest is sitting on the bed in his underwear, and the kid is now in his underwear as well. And he pulls him close, and he tells him, again I say, show me what you do when you think about or have impure thoughts about girls. And then finally, as you know, he's got this kid super close to him. Finally, we hear cut.
Like, I couldn't even breathe while you were talking about it, because I remember watching and was like, is this when I go get tea? Like, I don't feel right watching it.
Right, like, it just was so, like, I just, was so, I was like, please, stop. And especially when he was like, don't lie. Like, wait a minute, like, this is a kid. Maybe he's not at that point in his life yet, And then the fact, you're going to show me what you do when you think about these girls. Like, and as to say, not only like not that I'm gonna watch you do what you with these impure thoughts, like, no, you're gonna perform it on me. Like, that's the indication that I got from it, and I was like, oh, please make that stop. Like, and when he yells and Ed yells cut, like, it is like. And he yells it loud too, and I was like, "Oh, thank God!" Like, I can't watch this. Like, I thought this was going to be the point that I turned this damn thing off. Like,
this is where we end.
This is where we gotta stop
and cut the end. Goodbye.
That's it. I can't watch this shit. And then after he yells cut, then we actually get Ed talking about that he has had correspondence with the chief of police and the special prosecutor, and basically he gets this letter that basically states that they're done with his case. Like, they basically say, hey, well, this letter shouldn't be used to vindicate this asshole who did this to you. We have come to the conclusion that you are a victim, but due to we ain't got enough resources, we're just gonna say fuck this shit.
Yeah.
That's the end. That's basically what it said. I mean, it was, of course, worded nicely.
Oh, sure.
A bit more nicely than that. But that's basically what they said to him. Like, look, we feel like you have a case. We feel like that you're a victim of, but because we don't have the resources, fuck you in your case. Next. There's other things that we got to take care of. Like, what the hell kind of shit is that? Like, how is that justice for anybody? And don't get me wrong, I do understand that, unfortunately, with police departments and things, a lot of times they do have scarce resources. I'm not saying that they're not, but, like, is there not a process to figure out, okay, this person has actually been wrong. This person has actually been abused. Like, can we call somebody in? Like, we just tell people...
Can we call Rebecca? She knows what the hell she's doing. Can we call Rebecca?
Like, right. Like, what the fuck is going on?
You don't have her number on your desk? Like, add her to your Rolodex.
Right. Like, what the shit? Like, I don't
She will tell you what to do. She probably has a box on.
Right. Several boxes. Let's be real. And so that just confused the hell out of me. And, and I don't want to dog out the police, because, they're here to uphold the law, Don't get me wrong, there are, I feel like, we can talk about police brutality. There's good and there's bad police, right? But ultimately, like, you're just like, okay, we're just not going to do anything with this. We've got to worry about other things. Like, that just is so confusing to me.
And I think we all in our careers get put in one of those situations, especially with, the jobs that we have, and with people with, like, medical situations that could hinder their job employment, and there are, of course, times that we just don't have an answer for them. And I'm sure every career meets that, but help lead them into a direction saying, you know what? We don't know what to do. We don't have the resources to do it. Try reaching out to such
right.
and such.
Somebody, something, anything. Like, give them some kind of help. Like, not just, oh, well, yeah, we really think you were a victim, but...
Yeah.
Well,
your life didn't matter then, and honestly, it really doesn't matter now.
Right. Like, that was... I don't know, that just hurt my heart so bad. So then he talks about how he basically, someone got him in touch with someone who could reach out to the Pope. And he actually was written back from the Pope. And the Pope writes back to him and says, basically asks forgiveness, and that they both pray for each other. But ultimately, they still decline to remove the guy, Father Wart or Monsignor Wart, whatever he is, from priesthood. And I just felt like, don't get me wrong, like, okay, fine, the Pope takes the time to write you back, but it's like nothing happened from this.
And was it really the Pope?
It's
probably someone that worked for the Pope.
You're right.
Do you really think the Pope is sitting around with a feather, pen, and ink writing down, no. Let's pray for each other? And what we have heard in other cases, and if something like this happens, and when something like this happens, it's going to become public. And so sometimes businesses and companies and organizations would rather keep that off the public record, and so therefore they just shoo the victim away,
right?
And to try to slip it under the rug and be done with it.
Right. Well, and I will say that Ed, bless poor Ed's sweetheart, you know, he ends it with, well, I just think that the Pope didn't have the clout that he thought he did. And the fact that you can still believe in that whole, like, okay, like, the Pope really, he just couldn't, his hands were tied. You know, hey, I guess at least it's something that you can still believe in, because I'm telling you, it's all burnt to hell in my book if that happened to me.
Right.
You know, like, it's just, no.
Yeah.
And so it just, I don't know, that just, it ending with that just kind of, made me feel some kind of way. Then we fast forward. So this is when they're like literally bringing up all the letters, right? So Ed has just gotten his letter. So now Mr. Joe is writing a letter to the past Joe, like Kid Joe. So one of the things that Joe had mentioned earlier on and that we didn't talk about was that he could never confront his younger self. Like, he wanted to be able to confront his younger self, tell him that everything is going to be okay, but he had completely just locked that kid away. Like, that kid just no longer existed. And he writes this very long letter, and if he wrote this himself, Joe, my man, he is very good with words.
Yeah.
Like, it just was a very
I'm reading your book.
Yeah, like, right, it was a very heartfelt letter to Baby Joe. And I couldn't get over how well written this damn thing was. And to the point at which point eventually he basically tells younger Joe that you become the superhero that you looked up to, right? Superman was someone you looked up to, you know, because he was different. How often did you feel different because of what happened to you? And now you have dedicated your daily purpose into helping those kids that felt the same. And so it was just such a heartfelt letter.
Yeah. It's like that quote that, you know, we see and hear all the time. She needed a hero, so that's what she became.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it was just so well written. Then we move on to Mike, who is sitting in a booth by himself. Apparently this booth is a booth that he and his dad used to come and talk just about every day. And he basically tells his dad that he's going to keep seeking justice. Like, he can't help but to continue on. Like, he was like, I will do it until I get it. He had, at this point, I think he reached out to the Kansas Bureau of Investigation to take on his case. Like, this man is not going to stop. Like, I'm telling y'all better give him, like, he's wanting something, y'all better give it to him, because he's not going to stop. Like, he's just not. And then we kind of get to the point where we're starting to close out the documentary. So you have Tom, who we had mentioned before, who's just not really able to talk about his stuff because it's being pursued in court. He was still waiting for his day in court. You have Ed, who basically ends on saying that, you know, he wants to use this film to explain his abuse to his daughter. Like, he feels like they need to have that conversation, but it can't be him just talking to her. Like, he wants to use this to kind of help explain. Then we flash to some writing that says, December 2020, Michael's abuser, so we're talking about our queen, his abuser died. He quietly was removed from priesthood days before his death. So let's talk about that a little bit, right? So it says he was quietly removed from priesthood days before his death. So did they remove him from priesthood because he was dying, or because they knew this man fucked up, abused this person, and was like, you know what? Now we're going to do it while he's dying and nobody's really paying attention. Let's remove him now.
I think they did it to try to shut Michael up. So they knew that he was a dead man already. He wasn't coming back. And so, well, let's remove him. Michael will be happy that he's removed. He'll feel like he got justice, and we'll move on, and the church won't have to hear about it again. I think that's what it was.
And to me, that's just such bullshit.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, that is so horrible. Then we move on to Mr. Dan, who has shaved his beard finally. We didn't mention this in the beginning, but Mr. Dan and his beard. My favorite part was when our girl, Sasha, was like, what is this? And he's got this. He was like, oh, I'm just torturing my wife. That's all.
Right.
And so he finally shaves it by the end, and it has a nice little picture of him and his wife. And, you know, and his wife is quite quite a pretty lady. And then we finally hear the last words of Joe that I had mentioned earlier, reading his letter, basically talking about how Superman was the hero, and that Joe has actually become the epic hero in the story of us.
I had a hard time with this documentary, and even us discussing it at times. There were times I was able to chime in and talk, and there were times I just had to sit here and be quiet and focus on breathing. You know, there was a lot of triggers that came with it. I'm very glad that I watched it. I'm very glad that we discussed it. I think it's a good way to open up season 2. And of course, this was kind of a long documentary too, so it took us a while to even. So I thought that was another good way to open up season 2 is, you know, have like a nice couple hours with us, and then, you know. But I remember in the beginning when I said that I was mad. Mm-hmm. I still am. But not as, you know, I did feel a little bit at peace for these guys when it was time to turn it off. But I don't know if they're ever going to find the justice that they deserve.
Yeah, it sounds like that most of them are not going to find justice. Like, I'm hanging on for Tom's story because his is actually, you know, being investigated in the actual Vatican, which, I mean, that's pretty big, and as well as, you know, in the judicial system. So I'm hoping that some of it got put off due to COVID, and so I'm really hoping that
and maybe
he
now
has
that
his
they've
day in court.
100%, and maybe now that they've all developed this bond and this brotherhood, that with them doing this documentary now, and while his is still in court and being open and faced, that because of the attention that's going to come out of this documentary, maybe there will be acts to happen even just for his case. Mm-hmm. But because of that bond, they would all feel a bit of justice from that.
I mean, hopefully, because then it would be like at least one of us. Because one of the things that they did mention was
and they did it together.
That they did it together, and they did it, like, they mentioned that they did this together, and it also helped them in their healing, to do it for one another. Like, right. So, like, Mike was just like, you know, it made him very uncomfortable to shoot that scene that he did. Like, hell, it made me feel uncomfortable. I can't imagine what it was like for him, but he did it because he wanted to help out Ed. Like, he felt like he owed it to him, even though he doesn't owe Ed anything, but because he understands Ed, because he was there, because he was also that boy. He felt like he owed it, and it helped him in his healing. Like, that's what he wanted to do. There's something about service to another person that sometimes helps us in our healing.
100%, because you feel so destroyed and so broken down, and all because of someone else. And so when you become that person that does the opposite
for someone else,
to a stranger or to a friend in need, then it's a beautiful feeling. I'm so glad we did this one. I'm so glad that you're with me. I want people to send us documentaries that you would like for us to check out. This will be the time that Kiana will be mostly driving the car, and I'll just be here filling in my scenarios and how I relate to things and chat for a minute. So since Kiana is mostly going to be the leader of this part, I have a homework assignment for her.
Oh, you do? What is that homework?
Like, how great would it be? And we can do this together, of course. But how great would it be if we contacted these guys and asked them to be a guest on the show?
We can definitely.
I would love that, because there are so many people, like, documentaries, and of course true crime is so big, and they're all doing podcasts. Like, how great would that be? So let's work on that.
We will work on that.
Well, thank you for doing this. I'm so glad to be back. I'm glad the holidays are over. I'm so appreciative to the listeners, and please send us your thoughts, comments, likes, shares, and ideas for documentaries you'd like for us to cover. Have a good night, everybody.
Bye.